Hey Optimancers, Chris here. No, you didn't just catch me in an editing error. That's a script for a video that you can see on your screen. You can see it's titled Using D&D Beyond for Players. So the topic of the script you see is D&D Beyond, why I use it, some tips for using it, and I go through the benefits of using D&D Beyond, and I also go through the stuff that's not so great about D&D Beyond because there are drawbacks. I talk about the costs, the options, I discuss values so that my viewers who might be considering purchasing something on D&D Beyond can have some more information before they do. And players who use D&D Beyond might pick up a thing or two that they can do with the service that maybe they didn't know about. The video was recorded about a week ago, and right now it is sitting unedited on my to-do list. Then on Monday, I released a video talking about plans that Hasbro has for the monetization of their two major brands from Wizards of the Coast in a conversation with investors. And D&D Beyond came up in that discussion. And what I found overwhelmingly from comments on that video, and there were a lot of comments, was speculation as to what changes we can expect from the D&D Beyond platform. Or, as the CEO of Hasbro called it, Dungeons & Dragons Beyond. Hope that name change was a slip of the tongue and not a planned renaming. But there was speculation about what was going to be happening with D&D Beyond in the near future in that comment section. This was not optimistic speculation, and although I had tried to remain pragmatic in that video, that pragmatism was labeled as optimism by many of my viewers, and often as unwarranted optimism. Now that I have that response, what became clear to me is I can't just release that video anymore without addressing those concerns first, because they just became very relevant if someone is considering investing a single dollar into D&D Beyond content. Also, if you already have invested in D&D Beyond, like I have, let's just have our eyes open about what might be coming, as well as what probably isn't. But I'll tell you what, after my last video, there were a lot of comments that made it really clear that they had discovered now that I am one of these free market solves everything people. I was an apologist for it, and I was trying to tell you that greed is good. Now, honestly, what I was trying to do is tell you this is the world you live in, and you should probably know how it operates, whether you love it or hate it. Because if you are surprised when a company says they are doing everything they can to monetize their products, that should not be a surprise to you. That should be the base assumption. And when they say it out loud, it doesn't make it any more so or less so. That's the way they operate. Now, if they were to say they weren't going to monetize their products, well, then that would be newsworthy, but I would be very skeptical. Now, the thing is I try to avoid putting political opinions in these videos. I don't want to alienate any of my audience. But here, political opinions have been assigned to me, so I do feel like I need to respond to them. Do I think it is okay for a business to do everything it can to monetize its products? No, I think that's immoral. I think it's awful. I can't imagine. Join my Patreon. Link in the video description down below to help support this channel. And today I want to thank the following patrons: Sam S., Scott Dunnington, Scott Shields, Stephen Edmondson, TUM, Tazel, TomTom, Vu, Zachary Shapiro, Alex C., Hey Mr. Wonderful, Alexander Tinkov, Arden, Babrak, Blue Wolf, Blue Eyes White 7, Brian Delgado, Burr, Condor, John D., Daniel Sturgeon, DeCarpus 9, El Conquistadorito, Eric Harvey, and Falcon Neal. Thank you all so much for your support. Let's get started. Okay, so Tree Monk's Temple is, of course, a small business, and nobody's getting rich here, so it's not like I don't understand the difference. I hope you recognize the joke. Something like 600 YouTubers have over 10 million subs. I have under 100,000 subs, and the disparity in our views is similar. So trust me, I get the difference. But I hope you understand there would be a level of hypocrisy if I was to demonize profit motives when I make my living off monetized videos. I actually don't like inserting Patreon ads or Google ads either, but it's a necessity for me to do it. And the necessity is the earning of profit, even if that profit buys me groceries and pays the mortgage. So back to Monday's video, the first thing I want to get out of the way is a few comments about the possibility that Wizards of the Coast will not continue having an OGL for 1D&D. This is the open gaming license that Wizards of the Coast has had for the past and present editions that allows third-party creators to create and monetize their content. They have no requirement to have any such license, but it's something they've chosen to do, and there's probably a profit motive behind it. A rumor popped up a while ago that with 1D&D, the OGL was going to be eliminated, and Wizards of the Coast responded with a statement that the OGL wasn't going anywhere. I don't have a lot to say on the matter because neither by action nor by word has there been any indication by Wizards that the OGL is going to disappear, or even that it might disappear. Now, they could be lying. It's possible. But the thing I find about rumors is sometimes they're true and sometimes they aren't. They certainly aren't evidence that anything is going to happen. If you think they are, imagine a courtroom. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that defendant over there might have stolen the car. I've been hearing he could have. That is my opening and closing statement. We rest our case. So this comment is from Voice Test. Thanks, Voice Test, for leaving a comment on my video. You really give Hasbro too much credit. Look what they've done to the quality of Transformers toys in the last 3 years, massively skimping out on material and build quality. I did enjoy your unwarranted optimism, though. So what I was showing wasn't optimism. If I had said the products they're going to deliver us are going to be good, that would be optimism. If I said the products they're going to deliver us are going to be bad, that would be pessimism. When I say, let's wait and see what the products look like before we get outraged, that is pragmatism. And that's what I try to show in my videos. Now, I personally don't buy Transformers, so I can't really comment on the quality change in Transformers, but I can see that Hasbro stock has not been doing well, particularly in the past year. You can see here it has dropped and dropped and dropped about 40%. I do want to talk a little bit about comments on the video again, because one of the most common comments I had wasn't about Transformers, it was about Magic the Gathering. And all in all, they kind of all said the same thing. Hasbro has been messing up Magic the Gathering horribly, particularly in the past few years. And it's just been getting worse and worse and worse. And the claim that I see in these comments is that that's what's caused this drop in stock prices. And that's why we can expect them to do the same thing with Dungeons & Dragons. Now, I'm no expert on Magic the Gathering because I've never played Magic the Gathering. It's not something I've ever bothered with. Not a big fan of things like booster packs and stuff, and it just didn't appeal to me. But what I would say is I don't get the reasoning, because if you are in a company and you plan this ultra-aggressive strategy and this is the result, then there is no way. So take solace in this, because this is one thing I can say with confidence. There is no way they look at these results and go, yes, more of this. This is what we want. What happens if you are employed, and you don't have to be an executive in a company, you don't have to run Hasbro, you can have any job you like. If you screw up bad, you have two options. Learn from your mistakes and change how you do your job, or get fired. That's essentially how it works. If you do your job badly, you're often given another chance to turn things around. If you fail to do so, you're going to lose your job and you'll be replaced by someone more competent. Now, if Hasbro's stock had been skyrocketing over the past year with these predatory practices with Magic the Gathering, then you would have a fantastic point, because then they would say, yes, more of this, and they'd be looking at other brands like Dungeons & Dragons and trying to think about how they might apply the same strategy. Now, another kind of comment that was fairly common on that video was concern that just because a company wants profits and sales lead to profits and demand leads to sales and demand is created by us when we want a product and we consider it to be a fair price, the other issue is that a lot of companies are worried more about short-term goals than long-term ones. So they're not going to be worried about necessarily the health of the product in the long run. Instead, they're going to be worried about just getting as much as they can as fast as they can. And I can't tell you that that won't happen. That absolutely could happen. And the fact is we have seen this with Dungeons & Dragons already. We've seen it, in fact, multiple times. So those who've been playing D&D a long time, they remember TSR. So TSR introduced us D&D in the first place. We can thank TSR, actually, for giving us Dungeons & Dragons. And I've highlighted here TSR's high cost meant that the company nevertheless became unprofitable and saddled by debt. TSR was unable to cover its publishing costs due to a variety of factors. I'll tell you what one of those major factors was. At the end of TSR, their sales of individual products were going down. So in order to supplement that, they released tons and tons of product. And we just got covered in crappy products that people weren't buying very much. And most players I know moved away from second edition before the end of TSR. Facing insolvency, TSR was purchased in 1997 by Wizards of the Coast. Now, we should talk a little bit about what this meant for Dungeons & Dragons. So TSR went belly up. Their strategy ended up being awful for them. In fact, it was mismanagement too. They were printing all these products and they couldn't sell them. So now they're storing all these products in warehouses that nobody wants. So they were in bad shape when Wizards of the Coast came along. But like I said, we've seen this before. When a company puts out a ton of crappy products, we stop buying them. And that will usually result in the end of an edition, because Wizards of the Coast has been guilty of this too. We saw it in 3.5. They were just pumping out product after product after product. Now, that wasn't necessarily all bad product, but it was too much. It was way too much, and so people started not buying it. And the response to that was to print more to make up for the fact that each individual product was selling less. And what that led to is the end of 3.5. Paizo did the same thing. Look at Pathfinder 1 and the release of products near the end of that edition. And that is what history has told us, at least as far as Dungeons & Dragons goes. When these companies start really focusing on these short-term gains, ignoring the overall health of the product, usually means a new edition is coming. And actually with 5th edition, we know a new edition is coming. So it very well could be that they will flood the market with a whole bunch of 5th edition product. Now, I would hope they might have learned from past mistakes. Certainly with 5th edition so far, it appears they have, because their release schedule for 5th edition is nothing compared to previous editions. So it does look like they have learned some things. We'll see if at the end of 5th edition we get a ton of products. It could happen, but it's not the end of Dungeons & Dragons. And if TSR tells us anything, even if a company screws it up so badly that they ruin their own edition and they ruin their own company, it's still not the end of Dungeons & Dragons for us. Now, I spent all day Monday going through comments. I didn't get all of them, or even probably half of them, but I spent as much time as I could. I do want to thank everyone who did respond, and I do want to address what was probably the second biggest concern. I think the biggest concern was that Magic the Gathering, we've seen what's happened with that, and that's what's going to happen with Dungeons & Dragons. I don't think that's what's going to happen. If it does, people are going to get fired. That I'm pretty confident about. But there was the second biggest issue that people were bringing up in the comments, and that was in response to part of that conversation that I did play and I did go over, but I didn't really spend a lot of time on it. And that is when we're told that 20% of players of Dungeons & Dragons are Dungeon Masters. That's not a surprise. Dungeon Masters do most of the spending on the game, and that's not a surprise. They would like the players to be spending more. That shouldn't be a surprise. And specifically what they said is, hey, in video games, 70% of the total revenue comes post-sale. In other words, if you were to hypothetically spend, and I'll just keep the math super easy here, if you were to spend $30 on a video game, by the time you're done, you'll have spent $100 on that video game. And I realize the numbers can be much, much higher than that. I'm just keeping the math easy. And that's kind of crazy. So could you imagine if you were to buy a Dungeons & Dragons book for $50 And then by the time you're done, that represents 30% of your total spending on that content. That it would be a lot of money. Now, I want to be fair, and she didn't say that she could deliver that same ratio for Dungeons & Dragons. That is not mentioned. But what she does say is she thinks there is an avenue to get recurrent post-sale spending from players and I assume DMs as well. And she talks about the digital platform to do so. So there is going to be something that they're going to try to deliver for players post-sale. She called them exciting new options. And I was asked why it was that I didn't talk about that. Well, the reason I didn't talk about that is because I was trying to be pragmatic. And that's still really vague. Like, I don't know exactly what she means by that. But I've been asked to kind of speculate. So, okay, I'll speculate. I will start with the speculation that I saw in the comments. And there were certain phrases that came up over and over again. Loot boxes, paywalls, digital currency, microtransactions, and subscriptions. Not a surprise to see any of those phrases because these are the things we see in video games. Once again, I don't think the same thing is going to work for video games that works for Dungeons & Dragons. So I don't think these are great speculation, though I do think some of them are going to occur. But loot boxes, let's start there. I don't see how you make this work for Dungeons & Dragons. Because, I mean, we know what a loot box is. I'm not going to bother explaining it to you. But if you are playing a game that has loot boxes, often there is only one platform to play that game. And often that game is going to be competitive. So buying those loot boxes can give you an advantage against your opponent. But Dungeons & Dragons does not have a player versus player format. It is a cooperative format. And what would you put in a loot box that isn't in the basic rules or the books that we're buying that your DM is going to allow in the first place? I don't see how you make that even work. So unless they've come up with some method that I haven't considered, and I guess it's possible they could have, I'm certainly not omniscient, but I don't see how you make loot boxes work for Dungeons & Dragons. What about paywalls? So a paywall is when you're playing a video game and you reach a certain point, and then in order to progress any further, you must spend money. Now, when these become extremely egregious is when you didn't expect them. So you're just playing your game and then suddenly, boom, you want to keep playing? Give us your money. Now, I don't know how you would do that with Dungeons & Dragons, but there are paywalls on Dungeons & Dragons Beyond already. If you are, say, making a character and then you want to access something that you don't own, it brings up a paywall. It says, you don't own this content, want to buy it? And then you can choose to buy it. And then if you do, you can access the content. And if you don't, well, then you have to choose a different option. But it's not quite the same because it's not like you can't continue making your character. It's more like if you want access to content that you don't own, you're going to have to pay for it. But you can still use the content that you do own. So I don't think it's as predatory in Dungeons & Dragons Beyond, but paywalls technically are on the platform. But if your concern is that you're going to be playing Dungeons & Dragons and then your DM is going to say, and then you reach the Dragon Cave, to continue with this adventure, you're going to have to pay. I mean, I don't see how that's going to happen unless you have a DM who does that, in which case, run from that table. The next one is digital currency. So digital currency, again, I think we all know what it is. Here's how it works is you're going to spend your real money for fake money, and you spend that fake money on products within the digital game. And the idea is that you want the digital currency to be really difficult to convert to dollars, to actual dollars, so it is hard for players to keep track of how much they're spending. Could we see digital currency in D&D Beyond? I personally am skeptical that we would see digital currency. I don't think it's impossible because they do have the ability to add digital currency. Like they could say, if you want to buy content on D&D Beyond, you must use our digital currency. You don't have any other option. Except This isn't a video game where D&D Beyond is our only method to play Dungeons & Dragons, and that isn't going to change. So that is a big difference from a video game where you have no other choice. With Dungeons & Dragons, we have another choice, and what would happen is they would push people away from D&D Beyond because people have a negative opinion of digital currency for good reason. So I would think that even in the short term, that wouldn't work very well. And if it is pushing away players, even if they made the huge mistake of trying digital currency, I think it would have to be removed very quickly when they realize what a colossal error they've made. Let's talk about the next one. Microtransactions. Might we see microtransactions in D&D Beyond? Yes, we will see microtransactions in D&D Beyond. That one I am certain of. And the reason I'm certain of is because they're already here. The difference is, I think most microtransactions in video games are exploitive. The microtransactions in D&D Beyond, at least currently, and this could change, but again, I'm trying to be pragmatic and just talking about what I've seen so far. And what I've seen so far with microtransactions on D&D Beyond don't bother me at all, although I don't personally participate in them. So let me explain how microtransactions work in D&D Beyond. So I'm on my D&D Beyond page here. So let's go to sources, and I am going to let's pull up the most recent one here, Dragonlance. All right, so we have the Dragonlance book here. Now, let's say you haven't purchased this book yet. So if you haven't purchased this book, then you can go to the marketplace and you can purchase it, and it'll cost you $30. So $30 to buy Shadow of the Dragon Queen. Now, if you weren't planning to play this adventure, but maybe you saw the feats and you thought, you know what? There were a couple of those feats I really wanted to use. My DM says I can use them, but I want to have access so I can read them when I want to. I don't want to spend $30 in order to get access to 2 feats. Well, then this is what you can do. If you scroll down, it is going to give you additional purchase options. So if we go down to feats, you're going to see you can get the 9 feats from Dragonlance, and it'll cost you $9. So here it is. If you spend $9, you can get all 9 feats. If you only wanted, say, one of those feats, so I just want Initiative High Sorcery, that costs you $2. So then you could spend the $2, you can access Initiative High Sorcery, but you wouldn't be able to access the rest of your Dragonlance book. And this is pretty much the standard we see. It's basically $2. You want a feat, you want a subclass, you want access to a monster, whatever it is, it's $2. Now, I don't think these are an even deal. A feat seems a lot less valuable to me than having something more beefy like a subclass. And another thing they do that I do think is fair is that if later on, so let's say you bought the Lunar Sorcery subclass for $2, and then later you decided, you know what, maybe I will run Dragonlance. So I am going to buy the book. I want all of the stuff in it. Well, they will take off anything that you spent on microtransactions off the price. So if you've bought the feats for $9 and the Lunar Sorcerer for $2, so you spent $11, they will take $11 off the $30 price. So you will actually spend $19 to buy the rest of the book. I think that's fair. I mean, your best deal is to buy the whole book. But if you want to make the microtransaction, you can. That is still going to exist in the future. So microtransactions, yes, 100%. However, I do think we will see more microtransactions through the virtual tabletop. And this is pure speculation on my part. Look at the graphics here. This looks pretty cool. Now, if this virtual tabletop is just superior to the other options and people are willing to spend on it, there is an opportunity for them to earn additional dollars through it. And I'll tell you, this is not going to be free. There is a 0% chance you're going to be able to use this for free, at least as it's presented here. And that's because they're spending a lot of money developing this. I don't know how much money, but I'm sure it is a lot. And the reason they're doing that is to invest in the future of Dungeons & Dragons. They're thinking that we will spend this money now, but our players are going to want this product so badly that they're going to spend money in order to use it. And if that is true, then this can be a money-making venture for them. If you want to play for free on a virtual tabletop, though, you can play on Roll20, you can play on Roll20 for free, but it is not going to look anything like this. Now, for me, Roll20 is fine. I actually don't care that much about the graphics. I just want to play D&D, and Roll20 is a perfectly viable method for me to do that with my friends online, so that's what I do. But a lot of people might be enticed by these great graphics, and we don't know what else the virtual tabletop will entail. There may be all kinds of conveniences included as well. But I'll tell you what, for this virtual tabletop to make them money, what it's going to have to be is it's going to have to be a superior product. They will certainly charge more for it than we pay for Foundry or Roll20. I mean, look at it. Of course they will. The question is, will the value justify the cost? And when the time comes, I will probably go ahead and get this regardless, mainly because I have a YouTube channel where I review stuff like this. So I will show it to you, and I will be honest with you what I think the value is and what I think the cost is and whether I think it's worth it, so that you can make up your own mind at the time. And you know what? If it is too expensive for you, either you can't afford it or you don't think it's worth it, it doesn't matter. You have other virtual tabletops. We've been using them the whole time. We are playing D&D right now without this virtual tabletop, and we are doing just fine. But let's talk a little bit about the pricing here, because I would be surprised if it's just like, give us X number of dollars and you have unlimited content in this virtual tabletop. I doubt it will work that way. I would expect it will probably involve a subscription. I suspect it will probably involve microtransactions, like, you want to make your cool mini? Give us a couple bucks. And then you give them a couple bucks, and then you make your cool mini and you can use it. That would not surprise me at all. Once again, if you don't want to do that, there are other virtual tabletops you can use where you will not have to spend a penny. Now, if you want to download the virtual tabletop like Foundry, then there will be a one-time cost, and that's all you will have to pay for it. So it's all about value. Is this the value for you for the money it's going to be? And we don't know how much it's going to cost yet. So we don't know whether there will be enough value for the price. But I do expect subscriptions. I do expect microtransactions for this. So that's my speculation. I don't know this, but that wouldn't surprise me one bit. Now, as I said, I suspect there will be subscription costs for the virtual tabletop, but subscriptions also already exist in D&D Beyond. There's 2 subscription levels. They are optional. You don't have to subscribe to D&D Beyond to use it. But if you do the hero level, which costs you $3 a month, what it allows you to do is unlimited characters. So normally you can only make 6 characters on D&D Beyond, and then you would have to delete one if you wanted to make another one. For me, a channel that does all these builds and I link them to D&D Beyond, obviously I have to have this level of subscription. The next level is the master level, and this costs you $6 a month. And I do this one as well. And the reason I do it is I think it's a good deal because it allows me to share unlocked content with other players. So there is a limited number of other players I can share it with, but it's quite generous. It's 12 per campaign, and I think I get 6 campaigns I can use. So I can actually share the content I've purchased on D&D Beyond with a lot of people who haven't spent any money on D&D Beyond, and they can basically access it the same as I can. And I think there's enough value for me for that to justify the $6 a month. But again, these are both optional. Now, when it comes to the under-monetization of D&D, I think the answer is right here, and I will circle back to this when I conclude this video. Now, are you going to have to use the virtual tabletop if you want to play online? And the answer is no, you won't, and they can't change that. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is Beyond 20. Now, I'm going to be talking about that in my video on D&D Beyond, and I will be talking about subscriptions and some of the other things I've talked about already. But it is relevant to this discussion because if you want to make a character on D&D Beyond, but you want to use a different virtual tabletop, Beyond 20 is what you want. And it is a free Chrome extension. You can just Google Beyond 20. It'll come up. Then you can add it to your Chrome bar or whatever. And it takes like 10 seconds. And then it's functional. And it allows you to roll from your character sheet on D&D Beyond directly onto the virtual tabletop. And it works with Roll20, it works with Foundry, it works with Fantasy Grounds, and it would allow you to use those virtual tabletops with your D&D Beyond content. But I can't say for certain that they wouldn't be able to change the programming on D&D Beyond so Beyond 20 doesn't work anymore. They could do that. They could have their own virtual tabletop and then try to prevent you from using different virtual tabletops. The problem is that strategy likely wouldn't work. The first problem is those virtual tabletops have their built-in character sheets that you can use. And I've certainly used the ones on both Foundry and Roll20, and they work perfectly well. So I could make my character on D&D Beyond, and then I could simply copy the information onto one of those character sheets on those virtual tabletops and use that. And then I wouldn't need Beyond 20. It would be a little less convenient, but I could do that. So they can't prevent me from using them. Now, they could potentially do something like buy out Roll20, but buying out Roll20 still doesn't work because Foundry exists, and Foundry is something that you download on your computer. So then they would have to actually break into your house and steal your computer to prevent you from using that virtual tabletop. So what would end up happening is if they shut down Beyond 20 is we would stop using D&D Beyond for our character generation. And if we did that, we're not spending the money there. We would be spending it elsewhere. And that's the opposite of their strategy. So it's not a good strategy for them. Does that mean they're necessarily not going to do it? No, they've done bad strategies before. They might do bad strategies again. But if they do, it won't really work, and it won't prevent us from using other virtual tabletops, and it will not force us to use their virtual tabletop. If they want us to use their virtual tabletop, it better be good. So if you do want to use a different virtual tabletop, and currently you have no other options because they don't have a virtual tabletop yet, and you do want to use D&D Beyond for your character sheets, you want to use Beyond 20, and let me show you how it works. So this character sheet is for a character I played called Ghoulbert Godfried. Now, this was for a one-shot, but this is the Dread Necromancer build that I presented, I guess, a few weeks ago now, that I said I was going to try in game, and I did. So I'm going to show you how Beyond 20 allows me to use my character sheet on D&D Beyond on Roll20. So the first thing you should note is that it says right here, Beyond 20, there's a little tab. And if you click on it, there's all kinds of settings you can set up. Do you want to whisper your rolls? Do you want normal rolls? Do you want to roll twice? Do you want to roll with advantage or disadvantage? You can set up super advantage if you have elven accuracy. What you should really do is play around with it. You're going to find that there's a lot of options. But what I did is I set up my D&D Beyond character sheet to include those summons I was going to do. So I did some custom attacks. So here's Deathly Touch, so this is from Summon Undead. This would be if I cast it at level 6, and this would be if I cast it at level 8. So let's say I cast it at level 6, and then when I click on it, you can see this sidebar comes up, and then it shows Beyond 20 right there. That's what I need to do to roll it. I can roll it directly just by going on this icon right here where my cursor is. So I want to make 3 attacks, so I click it 3 times. Now, normally I would have this on a different monitor, but for the purpose of this video, it's easier for me to switch tabs. But if we go back to our Roll20 page, we can see right there, 3 ghostly touch attacks. It looks like I rolled well twice, and I rolled terrible on the 3rd one. So that's how Beyond 20 works. It allows you to make any roll that you need to in the game off your character sheet, and it appears on Roll20. It is free. So when we are considering the predatory pricing strategies of video games like loot boxes, paywalls, digital currency, microtransactions, and subscriptions, I think D&D is just, because it's not a video game, it's going to be very difficult for them to be predatory with these kinds of things. And some of them I don't think would work at all. Not only that, Magic the Gathering and Dungeons & Dragons, again, very different. Magic the Gathering has way more in common with video games. It's not a cooperative game. It is a competitive game. You get advantages when you spend more money in dealing with the other players. This doesn't happen in D&D. If I have a book and the other player doesn't have a book, I will let them use it because we are on the same team. That kind of dynamic makes it much, much harder for them to use that kind of exploitive behavior on the consumers for Dungeons & Dragons, and I don't see how they would achieve it. So it's not that I think they're too good or too moral to do exploitive pricing practices for Dungeons & Dragons. It's that I don't see how they would achieve it. They have competitors. We can go play another game like Pathfinder 2 if they start to promote pricing that we don't think is fair. But it's not even that. They don't even have a monopoly on Dungeons and Dragons. The products are already out there. We already have everything we need to play. If we're going to spend anything more on this game, then they need to present products to us that we want at prices that we figure are fair for what they're offering. And if they aren't, then we will continue to play Dungeons & Dragons without their support, or we will go to another game that does support the players better. Now, I think it would be pessimistic, and not just pessimistic, but kind of unreasonably pessimistic to assume that they're going to screw this up, because Wizards of the Coast has been running D&D for quite a while now, and I look at my bookshelf and I see some triumphs and I see some failures. Overall, I think D&D is a steal. If you want to look at how much you spend to go to a movie, and then you look at how much you spend to play D&D for hundreds of hours, this is the best deal in town. And despite the fact that some of the products haven't been great. And then this talk about they have this constant decline in quality. I don't think that's the case either. The biggest decline in quality I ever saw for 5th edition was the release of the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. That was their first source book. And then they came back from that with Xanathar's. So we see these dips and we see these climbs, and that's just part of the whole thing. But, if I look at my entire collection, I am very glad for my investment in D&D. So I think the only real question we can ask here is, if they're talking about recurrent spending, 70%, post-sale expenditures, and all that stuff she said, does that necessarily mean that now we're going to get crappy stuff? So I've spent this entire video saying, probably not that thing, maybe this thing, that thing already exists, but let me now make my big prediction. So we're going to begin by circling back to the statement. Recurrent spending by both DMs and players, video game strategies, focusing on D&D Beyond with profit for investors and exciting new options for players. I'm not going to lie and say I know for sure what was meant, but I promised at the beginning of this video I was going to speculate, and here is my guess as to what is going to happen. Because I listened to all these goals, and it seems to me there is a way they can achieve all of them, and it would actually work. So naturally, if I was to guess, that would be my guess. If I place myself in their boardroom and I'm told that they consider D&D to be under-monetized and they want me to come up with some way to use D&D Beyond to get recurrent spending for both DMs and players with these post-sale spending, a constant revenue stream by providing exciting new options for players, there is one big missed opportunity that just screams out to me. I think I would be looking at a big raise if I brought this up in response. The answer to every single goal is right here in subscriptions. I mean, there is nothing wrong with the two options here. As I said, I'm a master level subscriber already, but they are easily missing the biggest opportunity for subscriptions. And my guess is they've figured this out. So you add some subscriber options. First, a subscription level that allows you to use all the features of D&D Beyond with the core books without buying the core books for a monthly fee. Then you have a subscription for all the core books and all the character options. Then a DM subscription for the adventures. Maybe some other mixes of books accessed. And of course, you'd have some premium subscription with access to everything. Oh, and of course, you would have an add-on to your subscription that would allow you access to all the same books with unlocking the virtual tabletop. Think about everything she said. Post-sale expenditures, check. Recurrent spending, check. Player spending, check. Similar to video games, check. Exciting new options for players, big check. And there is so much more. I don't think it is a coincidence that this was brought up during the development of One D&D. How many of you are looking forward to buying 3 more core books in 2024? None of you? Me neither. But what they could do is simply update your access as the new content is delivered. this actually solves another problem that they've already had to deal with. So they updated Tome of Foes and Volo's Guide with Monsters of the Multiverse. The issue is that people own Tome of Foes and Volo's Guide to Monsters, and they don't necessarily want to buy a new book that is essentially a reprint. But with a subscription, you could simply update it. And they're not losing anything because they didn't buy that initial product in the first place. And they're gaining this new product and they're paying for it through their subscription. So it just deals with this issue of legacy content that they've had to deal with before. Well, this is a total solution for that. This would be a constant revenue stream, but still be a good option for players. I mean, talk about a good way to be inviting to new players. Rather than having to buy all these books, they can give D&D as well as D&D Beyond a try at a low investment. So if it's not for them, they can unsub without being stuck with these books they don't want and all the money they spent on them gone. If a player decides they like D&D, well then that subscription gets upgraded for an even more consistent revenue stream. I mean, come on. If you want my speculation, there you have it. This is what I think they're going to do. I am not certain, but it checks every box, and it would probably work. And I think the investments of time and money in 1D&D and the new virtual tabletop seem really well timed with doing things this way. Now, I am still speculating here, but this is my best guess as to what we're going to see with the under-monetization of D&D. Now, like I said, I can't promise you anything, but if I am correct, and I think there's a reasonable chance I am, then there's really no reason why you wouldn't at least consider giving D&D Beyond a try. And if that is the case, if I have eased your concerns at all, then you might want to check out my next video because I will talk about D&D Beyond. I don't think it's a must-have. I think it offers some advantages and there are some drawbacks, and I will go over those. And if you already use D&D Beyond, I will tell you what I know about using it, and maybe you'll learn some tips that you didn't know before. So I hope you will join me for that. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D, it is for everyone. Thanks, everybody, and I will talk to you soon.